Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. She is Alex Winley. He is Austin Robillard. I am Ian Hest. And guys, what was a good start 3 weeks later? We're feeling the weeds here in South Florida on a rainy Thursday as we start this conversation. 3 losses in a row to dampen the spirits of Inter Miami fans. And the first one at home, right? The other ones on the road, no goals scored, a couple goals allowed, 3 over 2 games. But this time, 3 goals allowed at the hands of Chicago Fire, a 3-2 loss. Miami's first home one of the year, dropping them to 2-3, still 6 points and still hanging right around that 9th seed in the Eastern Conference in the early season going. But definitely something that needs to start at least a conversation if there is a cause for concern. And that's where I think that we should start today. As we look at this game, Miami went down early and tried to fight their way back, got back to 2-2. It looked a lot better so far as they were gaining some momentum. But ultimately, as Phil said post-game, this team has made a couple of mistakes, and every single time they've been punished for it. And Kai Kamara was the latest example of that. That end of the game goal to give Chicago the 3-2 lead that ultimately wound up being the victory for them really deflated the team. You could see the energy just sucked out of Drive Pink Stadium. And something that really, if you're looking at it from the macro, from the season, this will be a game looking back when we're talking in August, September, October, that you were going to wish that you had 3 points from. And there's nothing that you can do about this now, but looking back, you're always going to say coulda, woulda, shoulda. And let's start there, guys, with the slow start, the inability to get ahead and on the front foot, Austin. We were sitting there and talking to each other and felt really that there was just something lacking. You were without Joseph. You were without Robert Taylor. We'll talk about international duty later on, but it just seemed flat from the get-go.
And it was very flat. I think the only shot that came from inside the box in the first half from Miami was the Franco Negri goal. So that explains more than enough right there. And I think in terms of talking about this game in August and September when you're making the playoff push, it reminds me of that 4-4 game that wasn't necessarily lost against Cincinnati last year, where you had an opportunity to get 3 points and completely, I guess I could just say, fluffed it. We talked so early on in the year about how Miami were doing well to get out in front of games at home, go into halftime with leads. And, this past week was the complete opposite. They went down 2 goals early. They clawed to get 1 back right before halftime, which honestly was a saving grace. It was a great trivela from Franco Negri after a huge pass from Jean Mota. But other than that, there was a failure to create any type of real offense in the first half. And yes, it's probably in part due to Joseph Martinez not being there, them still not having Leonardo Campana. It was the first time without Gregory at home. So they're still trying to figure out a lot of different things and how to progress going forward without some of these big players. And it needs to be worked on more and more and more, because whatever's going on right now in these last 2 games is clearly not working. Something has to change. We'll talk later on about the possibility of Campana. We'll have Joseph back at least in the coming week against Cincinnati away from home. But in reality, this team is just not where it needs to be, and they aren't going to beat the better teams in the East, because Chicago, as we said beforehand, was a wooden spoon candidate. And a team like Cincinnati coming up, who has real cup aspirations down the line with a lot of very talented players, especially offensively, it's going to be a struggle. And this team has to kind of, step up their game if they want to be considered real contenders like they were in week 1 and week 2.
Yeah, this game was really unfortunate. I know a couple weeks back when Gregory initially got injured and Miami went to play Toronto. Well, it was after the NYCFC game. They played Toronto. Post game, Neville flat out said, they didn't lose the game because Gregory wasn't playing. And I disagree. Now, looking at the Chicago game, it's very evident that Miami's missing something. They're missing Gregory. They're missing that just defensive presence in the middle. Gregory may have not been the most progressive passer, compared to his partner Jean Mata, but he brought something to the team, the leadership, and the defensive capabilities. And against Chicago, it showed. There was glaring holes through the middle. Victor Ulloa tried his best, but maybe maybe he isn't as sharp as he was when he was younger, or obviously this was I believe that was his first start since like last year, middle of the summer, and so he hasn't gotten a lot of playing time, and it showed. And then just the entire game for Miami, it was messy. It was not messy. It was just boring and predictable, and it was easy for Chicago to nullify a lot of their attack. It was slow. It was the same thing. It was trying to get Jamada deep and dictate. And what she did with the Franco Negri goal, which was goal of the week candidate. It was a great pass from Mata, great, even better finish from Franco Negri. But it was too slow and predictable from Miami, and we saw it against. Even before Gregory's injury, that we saw it against NYCFC, we saw it against Toronto, and now at home, Chicago, who, like Austin said, they're wooden spoon candidates. Miami, they were out. Chicago outplayed Miami, and credit to Ezra Hendrickson and the Chicago Fire for coming down to South Florida and getting all three points. But it was just a poor performance from Miami. The goals aside from Negri and Stefanelli, they both got their first Inter Miami goals. It was just slow, boring, predictable. I believe off air before this, we were talking about how Victor Ulloa and how he's going to handle all of this. And I don't know. I'm concerned heading forward because it was just too slow and tactically, they were in swinging these high crosses, and the center forward for the majority of the game was Nico Stefanelli, who was about 5'7" on a good day, and it didn't make sense. And even when they tried to play to feed, they couldn't really, because there's just glaring holes through the middle, and it was just slow, predictable. Chicago easily, just stymied a lot of it. And yeah, even when they were pushing for the goal, it was 2-2 at one point, and they were pushing for the winner, Inter Miami. I never once thought that they were going to get it, because it was just so slow, so predictable, endless crossing. And then we're not even going to talk about the Kai Kamara goal from Chicago, where Yedlin was just jogging back the entire time. And I don't know. It was just a complete collapse, and it's disheartening because they started off the season so well. They lose one player and suddenly everything collapses. It's strange to see. Most teams, they usually have decent backups, or they switch up their tactics a little. But Miami, yeah, for large parts of this game, it looked bad. It looked poor, and I'm sighing because I just remember those first two games against Philly and Montreal, and I was about to say Impact right there, but against Montreal, and they played very good, convincing soccer, and it just, everything's not capitulating. And now they're going away to FC Cincinnati, who's another good team, and a threat. Another loss is on the horizon, I feel, unfortunately. But I just struggle to see the Chicago game. That was their chance. Like you guys mentioned earlier, later in the season, when it comes to playoff time, that could be the difference. So yeah, unfortunate loss. And they're just gonna have to dig their way out of this hole.
Well, let's take it bit by bit there, Alex, because you bring up some interesting points, and not to belabor the point, but let's start with the obvious of Victor Ulloa being inserted into the lineup, Gregory out, and last week Austin and I were talking about the pod where he's the one guy that you don't have a natural replacement for. Out of every place on the pitch, you could find this team is very deep at everything but Gregory. And that was the big case. And we were talking about some options in it. The third option was Ulloa, the first one being the obvious of Robert Taylor, who was unavailable due to international duty, being called up by Finland. The second was Bryce Duke. We went through that, and we can talk about that if you want again. But Ulloa is, I guess, the most natural position if you're going to go through it. And I'm just checking my notes on his performance during the game. He got subbed off in the 58th, so played about an hour. His passing was good, 32 of 34. Here's where the struggles come from, though. He was dispossessed, which, granted, once in an hour, okay, whatever you want to do with that. But he was dribbled past twice. He had committed 3 fouls. And the big one for me, which is where you really lose the Gregory impact, is in head-to-head duels, 1v1 challenges. 1 for 9. That's just really, really poor, and it has to be better. If your 6 or your 8 is 1 of 9 on 1v1 battles throughout a game, there is a lot that's going to flood through the little crevices and get past you on that. I guess the question's a little bit twofold, Alex. If you want to start with it, is do you keep going with Uoa and hope it gets better, or do you go in a different direction? And how do you fix that sieve that clearly is leaking right now?
Oh, I don't. Well, obviously, for one, I think we can all agree we don't want to put this loss on Victor Ujoa solely. It's obviously a team effort, and it's kind of unfair to Ujoa. He's only like I mentioned earlier, I believe this is his first game started since 2020. So obviously he's gonna be a little rusty, and that's well, we can all agree it's unfair to him. But like you mentioned, Ian, I don't know. I don't know if they continue with with Ujoa, mainly because you know, I'm torn. Yes, they could continue, but who's going to replace him? David Ruiz, he's not signed to a first team contract. No, but he could. I think there's the 2-way thing with MLS Next Pro and all that good stuff. Benjamin Kremeshki, he's not a pure defensive player.
You have a game restriction with that 2-way player.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't really rely on him, when he's still 17, 18, still growing, so you can't really fully rely on him. What they can play Benjamin Kremeshki there, but Kremeshki is much more of an offensive. He wants to get forward. He wants to be that box-to-box player. He's not going to be doing that defensive work. Who else do you have there? You guys mentioned Robert Taylor earlier, but Robert Taylor, he's shown he's most dangerous in and around the penalty area as a winger, as a forward advancing number 8. Maybe not necessarily a defensive player. So they're kind of skint in this position here. And it's concerning because Gregory, he's posting on social media, he's recovering. He's, he looks in good spirits, but he's still in that cast from his injury, and he won't be back, maybe even for the season, maybe mid-season. I don't know. So that's the concerning thing is Miami don't have a lot of depth there. And I'm concerned going forward that this, when it rains, it pours. It's just going to continue because there's not a natural replacement for Gregory, and it's unfortunate that Inter Miami's entire system is really hinged on one player, and it's concerning in a sense that like we saw when Gregory got suspended in games like in last season. When he wasn't playing, Miami played poorly, and it's almost as if they can't really adapt when they lose this singular player, which is a concern because Gregory's going to be out for the foreseeable future. So what do they do there? I genuinely don't know. Do they go out and get someone? Jean Mata can't play. He can play it, but he's not. You want him further up the field, and you saw with that assist to the Negri goal. You want him further up the field, kind of on top of the opponent's 18-yard box. Quarterbacking from those deep lying areas. He's not going to be the pure defensive midfielder that he needs next to him. So I'm concerned and I'm confused. I don't know if they go out for someone, sign a MLS Next Pro a player to get some bodies in there. They may have to switch it up tactically. Maybe even have to change their formation a little bit. I don't know if it was you guys or someone else mentioned maybe shifting to a back 3. I don't know, but I don't know. Maybe throw Pizarro there. I don't know, but like it's a head scratcher. Genuinely, I'm stumped and I am concerned because how are they going to remedy this? How are they going to fix this? How are they going to? Gregory was just so important, and I just like I'm feeling this way because Chicago was such like they're good, but like wooden spoon. I don't think anyone really expected them to do anything. So the fact that Miami lost to them, even though they still had decent players on the field, Miami, it's just head scratcher, and I'm a little concerned, and I'm not sure where they go. Honestly.
I don't see any options within the organization right now. There are none. I mean, it's clear as day. There is no formidable Gregory replacement within the Inter Miami organization, and I don't think it's crazy to say that just because we've seen it in the last 2 matches. They've tried 2 different things, and it's pretty much they've exhausted all options. And I don't think that you're going to put the trust in, like you said, a 17, 18-year-old kid coming up from MLS Next Pro. And it seems extremely negative, like that narrative that there is no replacement for Gregory within the organization. There's no hope for it. But I truly believe it's the reality of the situation, and I think it's going to force Miami to make a move. Miami is not necessarily a team that's shown that they make interleague trades, at least in terms of acquiring players. Like, it's not been a big acquisition trade of theirs, but I think it's something that they're going to have to consider. It's probably a little tougher with the idea that there are still sanctions at play here, and they've already had to do a lot to mitigate the allegation crisis. But I think there has to be a replacement from elsewhere to come into this team to help fill the hole, and they'll want to do it on a relatively team friendly deal, and that's why I think bringing somebody in from within the league is probably the most reasonable option. But still, even then, at this point in the year, it's very tough to do. And I think Chris Henderson, this is probably more of a challenge now than even the sanctions were a couple of years ago. Like, this is a serious issue that they're dealing with, and I'm not sure where they go to, and I can't say I have an answer.
I still don't feel like I've been proven wrong on the Bryce Duke option. I don't feel like
The Toronto game,
I feel like with Duke, he keep play him forward. Don't play him as this cheeky kind of oh, he'll run back. Like, no, he's like, I don't want to like drag Bryce for this, but he's 5'9". He's a little on the lighter side weight wise. Like, you don't want you're wasting his skill set playing him further back, which he can, but you want him in
no, but I think
the Stefanelli Coco Jean areas, not so much where Gregor would play.
I guess what I'm saying, I put the option of him playing right mid last week. Maybe if you put him as the number 10 and put Coco at the right, I don't know. I still see that being, it's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid for sure.
Yes.
you can't have a Band-Aid for 8 months.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. If this was like a one-time suspension for Gregory, okay, maybe one game, but he's gonna be out for months, man. We're all scratching our heads.
Well, this also brings me to the option though of the fact that you haven't gotten a lot of offense, right? I mean,
yeah,
the team had and I don't like to use single game XGs, but the first game XG was 2.8. In the 4 combined games since then, it's been 2.5 total. So,
crazy, yeah.
So it's not. Yeah, I guess you're giving up goals, right? You've given up 6 goals in 3 games, but you've only scored twice, and I guess I just don't see where more offense would be hurting this team right now. If you're going to give up, I mean, Phil's been very clear that he wants more offense.
I'll tell you where it's hurting. They're trying to get offense pushing through the wings. They're trying to get offense pushing with Yedlin and Negri, and
that's where it's predictable.
It's not only is it predictable, but it's extremely tough to recover from. They're not able to get back, and they don't have that type of. How much did we talk about Gregory and Jean Mata forming a block in front of the center backs when Negri and Yedlin pushed up the pitch? It was necessary. It was an absolute necessity in order to defend against teams like Philadelphia and against teams like Montreal. With the wingbacks doing the same exact thing, the instruction is completely unchanged. It turned into almost all 3 goals against Chicago. It turned into the goals against Toronto. They were at fault, in my opinion. It comes down to the wingbacks. Of the 6 goals that Miami conceded in the last 3 games, I would probably say at least 3 of them were due to the wingbacks being so far up the pitch, trying to push for offense and not being able to recover, and leaving the center backs isolated in areas that they were just overloaded in numbers. And I think that that's a lot of what the issue is right now.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I found Ezra Hendrickson's comments after the Chicago match to be very interesting. He said that they had scouted the near post, or that how Miami defends on crosses was very narrow and very compact, and that he thought that they could exploit those far post runs where that trailer would be left alone. Now, for his part, Phil Neville had some flowery language in response to that and called it BS. Just, blatant point of fact. He thought that was not anything that was game planned for, or that Miami does, that maybe that's a subconscious. I don't know. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but Phil had said that it was BS. Do you, what side of these are 2 coaches that viewed that very differently. Which one do you see it as? Because I tend to see both points.
I would say I see both sides. I think Ezra Hendrickson said that it was narrow, but that's because you have two center backs, as I was just mentioning, with the wing backs fully up the pitch and having to recover. You have the two center backs worried about the middle, and you have someone like John Mota trying to drop in. So naturally, those three guys are crowding the middle area and aren't able to stretch out to the wings as quickly as they need to. And when they do, then there's nobody at the back to recover. So it's not even that Miami, get narrow, which I think Ezra Hendrickson kind of alluded to. He said that they get narrow when the ball is on one wing and they leave the back post open. I just think it's that both wings are open because they don't have the numbers in defense when a team is on the counterattack from an open spot from the wing. And that is exactly where it comes from. So is it BS? Kind of. Is it also kind of true? Kind of. It goes both ways, 100%.
Yeah, I don't honestly. I think I don't disagree, but kudos to Chicago for actually, pointing out some weaknesses and exploiting that. But yeah, like Austin said, I don't think they get narrow. I think it's the fullbacks are so high up the field that McVay and Kristoff and whoever the central defensive midfielder is kind of put on an island. So like for example, the first goal against that Chicago scored. You can say that they were narrow defensively, but I think it was just them crowding the box. So Shavilko didn't get a free header, and because of that narrowness, I believe it was Ryan Gutierrez that swung in across a low cross. The crosses that Ezra Hendrickson was talking about post game. Those low in swinging crosses that it wasn't to his head or anything or Shavilko's head or anything. It was a low in swinging cross, like a couple of meters. What am I saying? A couple of yards in front of Drake Callender, so he couldn't come out and save it. So he was kind of in no man's land. He had to stay back on his line. And so rewatching the goal here, Gutierrez swings in a low cross that misses a couple one defender, I believe it was Ujoa, and Shavilko whiffed on the first one, or he purposely just left it. And then that narrowness that Hendrickson was talking about, it's evident here because all of the defenders pinched in. And they left the back post open, but the narrowness came from Yedlin being all the way up the field and just not getting his man. Essentially, that's where the narrowness came from. So Nijal was on Gutierrez. Shavilko was through the middle with Sergey and McVay, and they were tracking him because Shavilko's a big guy and a Miami killer, and he always ends up scoring against Miami, whether he was with the Union or Chicago now. So they were both. McVay and Kristoff were both on Shavilko. Mata was on top of the 18-yard box, and Chris Mueller was wide open at the far post. And that's what the narrowness is, and Yedlin didn't get back in time, and then you had Drake Callender scrambling, and that's how Chicago got their first goal of the game. So that narrowness, I don't think it's them doing it. I don't know.
It's just a lack of numbers.
Yes, they don't have numbers back.
That's all it is.
Hold on though, because that happened. The exact same thing happened against Toronto.
Too. Yes.
Yep.
So now that's two games and two examples that we have.
So like one quick thing here. I don't think it's like I felt like I don't know Neville. I feel like he got like offended, but like it's narrow, yes, but like I don't think he's a like I don't know, like yes, it's narrow, but not in. I don't think the narrowness that Neville thought Ezra Hendrickson was talking about. I think it's just because they have numbers so high up, and it gets narrow because both of your fullbacks are in the attacking final third when one of them at least should be in the defensive third.
So as we look, I want to sort of transition this to Cincinnati and how do you fix these problems? Because Cincinnati offers a wide range of problems in terms of how they're going to line up. We can start with the wingbacks. I would prefer to start with their midfield that just overflows and floods the zone there, especially if Luciano Acosta is going 1v1 with Mota. That's a very dangerous matchup for Inter Miami. Acosta is he has not scored on the season, only has 2 assists, and yet somehow is considered by many of the pundits right now to be in the top 5 in the MLS MVP early season rankings, if you ask around the league. So that just goes to show what he's doing without actually contributing to goals right now. That's how influential of a player he is. Let's start there with him, because as we're looking at this midfield with what you do, whether it be Taylor, whether it be Victor Uo again, whether it be Duke or Kremashki or whoever it might be, what are you – I mean, Cincinnati's very clear in the fact that they come out with a 3-4-1-2. The wingbacks are straight ahead all the time. It's almost like a fake low block because they high press everything. They try to get you into turnovers high up the field, and they're going to overflow that midfield and make you figure it out. With Acosta being that danger man, just lurking constantly, a lot is on John Mota's plate. I spoke with him earlier this morning, and he recognized. I mean, he was telling me how he's probably the most important player on the pitch in this game for them, simply because he has to not only deal with the two up top with Brenner and Vasquez, but before it even gets to one of those two, he's got to deal with Acosta trying to find those pockets in between.
I think Miami will be severely outmatched in this game numerically, especially if they roll out this 4-2-3-1. I have my little tactics board here, and I'm lining up the numbers. So Miami in a 4-2-3-1, Cincinnati in this 3-4-1-2 that they're playing. Numerically, they'll have three center backs, and Miami will play with like a front three. So the three center backs will get the two wingers and the center forward. The only free attacker would be the number 10, whoever that is, whether it's Pizarro or Bryce Duke. So they'll have a free role, but Cincinnati's two central midfielders will pick up the two central midfielders in Miami, and their wingbacks will be picking up the fullbacks, which is the issue for Miami, that most of their offense comes from Negri and Yedlin. So numerically, Cincinnati has that covered, bar that one number 10 from Inter Miami, whoever it is. And so and then you get to the Cincinnati's front three with Acosta, Vasquez, and Brenner. It's 3v2. So if Miami's fullbacks get high up, it's 3v2, and it's McVay and Kristoff on an island versus Acosta, Brenner, and Vasquez. So numerically, it's not looking good. So I don't know, especially when they're playing away, and unless Miami reverts to like a 4-3-3, which is only slightly better, you'll have one DM deep lying, and they can pick up Acosta and maybe build out from there with a stray fullback. But yeah, numerically, if Cincinnati, they'll have that. They'll have that covered pretty well, and I fear that Miami, it's going to be one of those games where it's going to be an ugly offensive game for Inter, and Cincinnati will dominate and kind of stymie out anything Miami tries to do, and they're playing at home as well, so the crowd will be behind them. I'm sure the weather will be slightly cold. I do worry.
35.
Yeah, 35, so it's going to be cold. Miami are terrible away. It just screams Cincinnati victory, and they're going to have to do something. Gregory, you don't want to play Bryce Duke there. What do they do? Because Cincinnati's very good. They've got the attackers. They have the midfield stability. What do they do?
So tactically, Alex, I think you've gotten covered, but I want to go straight to the numbers here. Yeah. Miami's record against Cincinnati is pretty favorable. 4 wins, a draw, and only 1 loss. And 2 of the 3 games that have been played away from home, one of them being the actual TQL Stadium opener, Miami have 2 wins and just 1 loss. So
last year was a loss and a draw, though.
Last year was a loss and a draw. Last year was a loss away from home and a draw at home. The year before, they won away from home 1-0, and then they also played. Did they play Cincinnati twice away from home? And maybe because it was still that regional type stuff. But the TQL Stadium opener was a 3-2 win that Miami had, where Gonzalo Higuain scored really late. So history is on Miami's side. Tactics, according to Alex, and I think everybody else who has a brain and watches soccer, really understands that they're not.
Yeah, this is one of those games. I thought that we sort of felt like it with New York City, but things were riding high, where the situation does not benefit Miami, and they're going to have to find creativity. Now, the one thing that you feel a little bit better about is Joseph Martinez getting to go and play for Venezuela, played 2 games in Saudi Arabia, scored a goal against Saudi Arabia as well, the opener. In Jeddah, where he was. Robert Taylor also returns from playing in Finland. And the hope maybe there is that Joseph found the scoring ways that now he can get a little more involved. We still don't know the status of Campana. I want to talk about that after this. But with Joseph just getting back and maybe being able to score some goals, Is that uh, is that a bright spot? I want to put lipstick on this pig if I can, because I know that we're all very, very down right now, and I don't want to be too down because I do think that Miami has the talent to compete with Cincinnati. Just right now, when you go, if we do the whole NBA playoff thing, and sorry for mixing my analogies all the time, but if you do the whole NBA playoff thing of the top 5 players, Miami doesn't really stack up with the 1 through 4 in this game. So they're going to have to figure out different ways to be creative to get things going. Could Joseph be that talisman for them?
Yes, but who's going to feed him the ball consistently? Like you have Mata playing a more defensive role, and he's usually, that assister from deep, and we saw that against New York City, where Pizarro maybe can link up with Joseph, and maybe they can sneak one counterattack wise. But I think Miami, they're so hell bent on building out of the back, and even against Chicago, where maybe they wanted to play a little bit quicker, they always slowed it down for some just tactically, inexplicably, like they didn't want to go quick. So I fear that Joseph, yes, he can be that player, but maybe instead of playing it fast and trying to get Cincinnati on the break, they'll try to slow it down again, and just try to work through their passing patterns to unbreak them. But I think, in MLS, it's such a physical league, and sometimes, athleticism does trump, like, it trumps, tactical ability, which, this sounds terrible to say, but like, MLS is a more physical league, and athleticism sometimes does help. So against Chicago, where most of, Miami were flinging in crosses, and all of the forward lines, like they were like, all the players, they were like 5'7" and under, and it just didn't make sense, and they wasted a lot of chances like that. And when Joseph comes back, he can maybe get that one-off goal because he's just that good. But who's going to feed him the ball consistently? Cincinnati will be well aware of him and man mark that, and so Joseph will be on an island, and Miami is spending most of the game tracking back, leaving gaps in midfield, and Cincinnati will break with their wingbacks, they'll break with their center forwards, and they'll get a goal eventually. So yes, Joseph can be that player, but I fear he's going to be on an island by himself a lot of the time with the Cincinnati setup, and it's just going to maybe not be the best game for him to get involved as much as the New York City game, if that makes sense. Offensively, yeah.
I think with Joseph coming back into the lineup and seeing what Stefanelli did as a number 9, his ability to move, his ability to drop in and get on the ball if he wanted to, and then eventually scoring the goal, kind of shouts from me to Phil Neville to say, look, play Stefanelli more forward, don't use him as a number 10, get this team a little more narrow, maybe crowd the numbers in midfield. Go with something like a 4-3-1-2 where you play Coco Jean in behind Stefanelli and this quote-unquote diamond that we've been waiting with Campana for. See if Stefanelli can play next to Joseph Martinez. Put Coco in behind. Have Pizarro and Bryce Duke play as these box-to-box number 8s and leave Jean Mota in the hole. I think if you have a couple of guys in the midfield that are a little bit more reserved in terms of going forward, in terms of having the instruction on Bryce Duke and having the instruction on Rodolfo Pizarro to stay narrow, to stay inside, and kind of cover Jean Mota a little bit. Have Coco kind of make that inverted triangle with Stefanelli and Joseph up front. I think it's more. It would lean to a little bit more of a balance rather than trying doing like, okay, maybe we should focus on offense versus maybe we should focus on defense. If they can keep it as conservative and as balanced as possible, I think that is something that I personally am seeing. It doesn't look like you both agree.
Well, yeah, I need you to talk.
No, I don't disagree.
More.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So here's my thing. If you leave Coco Jean out onto the right and you leave Rodolfo Pizarro out onto the left and you run a double pivot of Jean Mota and Bryce Duke, if we are assuming that Victor Ulloa gets dropped and Stefanelli plays as the 10, I'll answer a couple questions, yes or no. All right. First question: has Nico Stefanelli been productive as a number 10 this season?
No.
Okay. Was Bryce Duke a good partner next to Jean Mota in the Toronto match when he played as a double pivot box-to-box number 8 in the Toronto game?
I
No.
still think he can be.
Personally, no, for me.
I don't think so. Does Jean Mota need help in the midfield when it comes to defensive covering?
Yes.
Have we liked what Pizarro has done going forward as a left winger?
Yes or no? Yes and no. I like his
Earlier.
I like his ball retention, but
Yes.
he needs to let go of the ball quicker when it's the situation calls for it.
We've been
Okay,
saying
my
that
last
for
question.
3 years.
Yes.
I know. And my last question goes to Coco Jean out on the right wing. Would we rather him play as an out-and-out winger, or would we rather him play as a more connected attacking midfielder?
I like what he did on the right. He tucks in a lot and that
Which is
allows
okay.
yeah.
I still
Yes,
don't
I
know.
know.
I think the jury's out on that.
Okay.
Oh, so no, yes, no, as a central midfielder.
So, if you get help around Jean Mota and you ask Pizarro to be an 8, you ask Bryce Duke to be an 8, and you leave 3 guys solely in front of them to handle the attack and use Pizarro and Duke as just transitional midfielders rather than guys who need to, I guess, in terms of Pizarro, have the kind of ball retention that you're talking about and progress it in that way rather than just trying to connect and move forward quickly and use them more as a defensive shield in front of the back line with guys like Negri and Yedlin nonstop pushing up the pitch. Then I think you form a little bit more stability in the midfield because they don't have that and there's no other option right now.
I guess I just feel like that's such playing not to lose. And I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying with giving up the goals, but like if
They have to stop the bleeding somehow. Honestly,
if you're going to go that nuclear, why wouldn't you just play 3 center backs and 5 at the back to protect against that? And then you have the 3 center backs and Mota, and you're just building the same block that you were before, right? Like I just feel like if you're going that,
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Yeah,
either.
Yeah, which is but. Yes, but who's going to be the third center back? Ryan Saylor, Mabika, God forbid one of them gets injured, then Miami's down another center back before Ian Frey gets healthy. And I know, I just worry about the depth in that regard. But
the only thing that I'm saying is that I feel like if you concede that this team is going to give up goals, which I do, you might not. So you might be trying to protect against that. But I'm conceding that this team is going to concede 2-3 goals a game. And my only remedy for that, the only time I've ever seen Miami be able to fix that, has not been shoring up the defense. It has always been scoring more, bombs away.
But it's never happened that way.
Against Cincinnati, we saw 4-4.
Right. Okay, but how many other times
last season?
How many other times in this team's history have they scored 3 goals or more in a game?
Like twice, honestly, twice.
They
in
scored
history.
3 against Toronto a couple years ago. They have the 4 against Cincinnati, and now
the Orlando game.
There
4-1 Orlando.
Yeah, there weren't many times where this team has scored those goals in close games, and I don't think that they have the offensive firepower to do that right now. And with that said, if you want to continue to add on to the offense, then you're going to risk even more defensively, and you're probably going to end up giving up more goals, just like they did against Chicago. You can't sustainably give up 3 goals, especially at home, and predict that you can get points. Like you can't. It's not sustainable. It's not possible, and that's why I think I've come to this reserve thinking, which I never have with this team before. I've always been on your side with this, Ian. But looking at how the wingbacks have played, and granted, I was a big believer in it at the beginning of the season. I loved what Franco Negri could bring to the offense. I loved the balance that it could bring on both sides. But with some of the graphs that I showed you guys in our message and I posted on Twitter just now, and the spaces they've been leaving in behind and giving up the goals because of those exact reasons, you're not going to be able to stay in this season, more or less a game from week to week. You're not going to be able to stay in the season conceding 2-3 goals a game because they're not scoring that much. And I don't even think when Campana comes back, still without Gregory, that potential is there. They have to fix things defensively. I don't even think it has to do with the center backs, honestly. It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the absence of Gregory and the absence of the positioning that the wingbacks are not taking up.
I completely
Yeah.
agree with that. I completely agree
Yes.
with that with the absence of Gregory and the absence of the wingbacks playing defense. I just think that is the card, that's the hand that you're dealt, right? Like that's what this team is going to be. And so my solution is just to win games 5-4. Right, like that's just the ultimate difference. And yes, this team hasn't doing it. Let's talk about Campana. He is still heading back, I would say probably doubtful for this week against Cincinnati. When he comes back, is that an option? We talked preseason about all the offensive weapons. We haven't seen any of them. The team has 6 goals from 6 different players. The only attacking one of which is Stefanelli. Well, Coco got one too. But I mean, you've gotten now as many from the defense as you've gotten from the offense. So I just really don't. I guess I would like to see more offense first and then try and solve the defensive issues. Alex, as I look towards it, and Austin mentioned a lot of what his graphs are, which I encourage everybody to go on Twitter and check out what he said. Well, a lot of it goes into positioning, which we've talked about, but a lot of it goes towards ball possession where it's effective. And for Miami, we've seen them resort back to a lot of the wing play, a lot of those low percentage crosses that I guess got you 2 goals against Chicago, but are very low percentage. And Miami has sort of gotten away from. We still have not seen a solid build-up play goal, something that represents sort of a possession style attack like we saw in the preseason.
Yeah, but before I answer this, I want to go back to the wingback thing. Realistically, this could all be solved if Negri pushes up, but Yedlin tucks in as a third center back, and then that's that. Instead of having both of them go so high up the field, it's just one like tactical wrinkle that they could implement that would solve a lot of the issues. Just have Yedlin tuck in as like a third center back, kind of like with France and Jules Condé and how he's playing as a right back, but he's really a center back. Yeah, sort of like that. Just have a back three, but him lining up as a fullback, but just have him tuck in, and then Negri's free to play as an attacking wingback at this point, and then you'll still have the 3 defenders back there, and then the midfield is free to go up there and create, and then you'll still have the comfort and stability of 3 defenders behind you, and a lot of this narrowness and Sergei and McVeigh being left on an island would disappear if Yedlin just tucks in and stays back as sort of a central defender more so than a fullback. But anyway, yeah, to your point, I think with maybe if Campana, like you said, he'll be doubtful, but with, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But with this current state, you talked about passing patterns, and like you said, I don't think we haven't seen like a real like 4-pass goal in a build-up. It's always been like individual plays of brilliance, or the Robert Taylor goal, Coco, Franco Negri to Mata to Negri, that was like 2 passes, and we haven't seen a prolonged build up to a goal. And coming into the season, we talked about how Miami wanted to be possession based, and it seems like every season they want to be possession based, but they always revert back to the same old counterattack and go. So so it just never turns out for them, and I feel like this season, especially without Gregory, it'll be similar. Or they want to be this playing out of the back possession-based team. That's why they went out and got Kristoff. But they're probably going to revert to playing a little bit quicker and playing, unfortunately, I don't want to say, but maybe a little bit of hero ball, like individual moments of brilliance with some of the players. Because, right now, the passing patterns, unfortunately, just aren't there quite yet. Maybe they have to gel, but I think they're going to have to switch it up in the way they play. Maybe play a bit quicker, play with, out and out wingers now. Maybe Ariel Lassiter gets some minutes, putting Robert Taylor back out at the right wing spot. They got to switch it up because, Cincinnati's a very good squad, very good team. And, they got to try something different, because I don't think what they're doing now without Gregory is going to work for the future.
Austin, let's talk about the possession, because it has been possession kind of without a purpose, right? I'm just going through Montreal. It was at 44%. Philadelphia was 48%. Those are the only games it was under 50. It was 57 against NYCFC, 52 against Toronto, and 67% against Chicago. They had 2/3 of the possession. And if you watch that game back, it didn't feel like it.
not only did it not feel like it, but one thing that I've been like a huge advocate for was like testing where Miami were controlling possession, like where their passes were being made when they're in possession. They were doing well to start the year in terms of actually progressing the ball into the opposition half and then when having possession, completing passes in that half. And here, of the 590 passes that they had with 67% possession, still most of them came in their own half. Over 50% came in their own half. And when you're down 2 goals, when you're clawing to get back into the game for as much time as they were, there is no reason for most of the passes to be in your own half. They need to find a way to get the ball forward. And that is where the glaring issue is. And that's exactly what you said, Ian. It's possession without a purpose. And I think that is really hindering this team right now.
The most dangerous drinking game in the world would be if you have Miami making a progressive pass and the immediate response to it being a negative ball. Right back negatively. It would be the most, if you took a drink every single time, you'd be in big trouble. So I tell you all at home, do not play that game because it's just shocking. It's just shocking how often the negative ball keeps coming.
And it was noticed by La Familia.
Say it again.
It was noticed by La Familia last game. There was a time where Bryce Duke pinged a half volley all the way back to Drake Callender.
That's right.
When he was 15 yards past the halfway line.
Yeah, and it's like
hey, what are we doing? We're down a goal, and we need to score. There's no reason to reset to Drake Callender when you had all this time and space in the midfield.
No, you're right.
That was a perfect emulation of exactly what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, no, and the negative balls will drive me up a wall. They always have. They always will. And you guys are spot on with it. That there needs to be more of an understanding of playing through the midfield. When we say playing through the midfield, that can include the wings, but it does not require the wings. It can be playing through the central part of the park. It can be carrying. It can be a progressive pass. It could be a 1-2. There are many different ways of doing this. There are many different ways to provide purposeful possession and not just let's play a long ball along the wings and try and make a cross through, which we saw so many times in years past. And so many times it just felt like it was, banging your head against the wall and expecting it to break through like you're the juggernaut. It just was never going to happen. So as we look at this game, let's just put a bow on it. I know that this is a difficult matchup for Miami, one that will require a great performance for them to come away with 3 points for sure. Let's analyze sort of the ability to manage the game, because I think, Austin, you brought up a good point there in terms of how much are you going to dictate pace of play based off managing expectations for this? Are we still too early in the season to get away with a draw? Is it now that you want to attack a game because you drop points against a Chicago team that we don't expect are very good? Let's also remember that 6 points through 5 games is still the best 5-game start in Inter Miami history after 5 games over 4 seasons. So they are still in a better position now than they have been in the previous 3 seasons. Are you just looking to manage a long season right now, or are you looking to attack this game?
Sadly, I'm looking to manage a long season right now, and I've never been that kind of a person when it comes to this team. But as we've just spent 50 minutes talking about the glaring issues that are with this team right now, I think really away from home, where your form has been poor, against a team that looks like they're going to outmatch you number for number, you've got to be conservative and you've got to do what you can to retain any type of point in this one. If you can go after the game late on, sure, that's fine. But throughout the first 70, 80 minutes, just stay in the match as much as you possibly can and don't give up too much, just like you did against Chicago. Don't get overzealous in the first half. Be conservative, play it smart, let yourself have a chance in the game for all 90 minutes, and I think that's the way they need to approach it before they come home in the next week to an FC Dallas team that, we will talk about in the upcoming week, but that's a game where you attack and you possibly have Campana back. So I think right now it's try and get on your feet, stabilize a little bit, and go from there.
I agree.
Okay, thanks, Alex. No, it's good. I didn't
No,
even
yeah, but the FC Dallas game, I think that's huge. The Cincinnati game, I think it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be
this
tough.
will be tough. And
Unfortunately,
I didn't
yeah,
even get to talk about Obi Nwobodo or Ray Gaddis or Matt
yeah,
Piazza.
and
I mean,
Barriol.
Cincy is
Come on,
way
that's
that. Yeah. I mean, he was said to be the weak link on this team, Alex, and
yeah,
he's been solid for the first 5 games. This Cincinnati team is way better than it has been in years past, and
good for them.
there's a
Yeah,
reason. There's a reason that they're getting the accolades. They are solid across the board. I will say again for our viewers out there, listeners to this podcast, this game is free on Apple TV. This is the 4th game in 6 that Inter Miami has been free to watch on Apple TV. You do not need a season pass to have this game. So that's, I mean, you want to win those games, obviously. But anywhere in the world, you can watch Inter Miami watch this game, and I think that's great to be able to do. Guys, before we go, real fast, want to touch on Inter Miami 2, who opened their season with the loss against Chicago B or Chicago 2, 3-1 in that game. Again, those games also on MLS Season Pass. They'll travel to Philadelphia in their first road game this year. So keep an eye out for them. And the Generation Adidas Cup coming up starting this weekend. The U15s start at 9 a.m. All these games are on Season Pass as well. They'll be taking on Philadelphia Union, the 17-year-olds who are coming off a tremendous last year with winning the trophy there. They will be looking to replicate it as well. They'll go up against Red Bulls in the afternoon. I think it's a 2 o'clock start. So that'll be a little pre-March Madness for you before everything gets going with the Final Four and the Generation Adidas Cup. I think that covers it for everything this week. And here's where Austin loves to go through all of the lovely socials and everywhere where you can find us. You can find us at the Heron Outlet on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitch. Watch Austin's Twitch for previews of every single game. You can subscribe to our Substack at theheronoutlet.substack.com. And you can listen to us and follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. I think that covers it all. Perfect. Thank you all. For our producer, Andres, she is Alex Winley. He is Austin Robillard. I am Ian Hest, and we'll see you back here this time next week.